So, hey, folks, you're very welcome to our Engage People Videocast. Our purpose as a team is to align business with talent to create happier, more productive workplaces. I'm certainly very lucky as part of my week. I get to chat to some great people, and I think it's fair to say I learned early on when I set up Engage People that I wanted to really surround myself with some, the best advisors. So delighted to introduce Shane Cradock today. So Shane is certainly a familiar face and voice to lots of us. He's worked over the last 20 years, Ireland, the UK and the States across lots of different industries. So Shane, we can chat a little bit more about some of the work we've done together. But firstly, I'm going to ask, how are you? I was just about to ask, how are you coping? But that's a negative connotation. So how's life at your, yeah, and how have you been over recent weeks?
There's no problem with negative connotations on my side. No, first of all, it's nice to be here. And I was thinking to myself, you said you surround yourself with great advisors, and you're still looking. Uh,
Mm.
so let me know when you find them because I want to talk to them too. Um, yeah, so look, like everybody else, Paul, it's on one level, it's a crazy time because what's happening is just unprecedented. I think most people that I'm interacting with over the last 10 weeks is probably mentally trying to adjust to what's going on, and also not just what's going on, but maybe the questions and the uncertainty that's come in now about the future, about their business, their organization, their pay, their families. So it's an interesting time for me personally. I'm a small business. I used to have a practice years ago, and I changed the model. So from that point of view, I probably minimize the pain on my side because I've got a solo practice, so that makes it a little bit easier for me to adjust. But 70% of my clients would be entrepreneurial, about 30% would be corporate. Most of the corporates are reasonably okay at the moment because of their size. The entrepreneurials would vary in terms of their pain. Anybody in
Mm.
restaurant hospitality, a lot of pain. On the tech side, if they're on the right side, they actually could be, and I know a couple that are thriving out of the current situation. So for me, some businesses ramped down, some businesses ramped up. I've had some new business coming in, and then I'm also just exploring, like a lot of people, how to use technology in new ways. And that's, to be honest with you, if I'm being really honest, it's exciting.
Mm.
Um, I think there's, maybe we'll talk about it later on, but I think that from my point of view, the changes or trends that I would have seen happening have now been accelerated. I think it's a good thing, but speed often brings pain. Change brings pain,
Mm.
but pain is good in most cases. So that's a long-winded way of saying that I'm okay, but I'm adapting. I have lots of change like everybody else.
Of
So
course.
enough about me. How's it going for you?
Yeah, yeah. Well, thanks for asking. So, yeah, it's remarkable to a degree in that as a business, we've the last 6 months in particular have been positive for us. We've been moving in the right direction. There's been a number of different projects where just haven't really, pre COVID-19 hadn't got down to, and to a degree, you sort of make excuses because you're busy, and when the business is performing well, everything else seems to be okay. But we've had a really good opportunity now to sort of take a step back, identify what are the sort of the classic important but not urgent projects to get stuck into. And I think like probably for the first time really since I just worked by myself, I've an opportunity to really properly structure my day, and I've really learned a lot around that. I think like yourself, I mean, with technology now, it's an absolute necessity for us within the recruitment space. So obviously we're on a video interview platform at the moment. That's something we've sort of jumped into with 2 feet, and that's worked very well. There's a number of processes that we hadn't, that we've managed to reignite that are far more active now, due to that piece. And I think, and we'll get into it now, but just, I mean, traditionally in the recruitment world, you have the sort of the permanent hiring, which is, the majority of hires in the finance world. Then you've got the temporary and contract side. And I think there will be a sort of remote piece, and, it's identifying that. And there's a lot of discussion going on, as to who it suits. And you'll hear lots of different stories around that.
Yeah.
But maybe before we get to that, I mean, so we've been working together over the last 2 or 3 years. I'm very lucky to be part of one of your groups, which is called the Inner Circle, which I know sounds very exclusive, but it's there's probably 10, 15 business owners. And look, we find it to be a great support structure. I think one of the things that struck me earlier on, and this has been really, very, very helpful, particularly over recent weeks and months, is that rather than say maybe overloading me or us with sort of systems, instructions, frameworks, a lot of it was really focused in on the mental side of leadership. So maybe do you want to just talk about that as to how, because you've obviously been working in this space as an advisor to lots of CEOs, and high performance across lots of businesses over a number of years. How did you arrive at this point where the mind became such an important piece for you?
I don't want to bore everybody here with my long story, so I'll give you a really short version of that.
Mm.
Like maybe 25 years ago, I had difficult personal circumstance where I ended up in difficult mental circumstance. So my mental health had become compromised, and to the point where I was depressed, and I was actually suicidally depressed. So I'd ended up in this kind of very difficult situation where, I was gone into a dangerous zone. And luckily for me, I had somebody who cared about me, who intervened at the right time, right place. And just long story short, if that hadn't happened, I probably wouldn't be here. So because of that, then I ended up going into a counseling. There's about 200 different models of counseling you can get. I just happened to get this guy that had a certain approach, and it was the right approach for me. And he was the very first person that ever said to me, do you realize that you have a mind? And honest to God, until that point, I didn't ever think about that. I never considered, what do you mean? What's a mind? And that was 25 years ago. So, a lot has changed in society since then. People are more open to that discussion. At that time, it wasn't really acceptable to talk about even what I'm talking about now. It was very challenging. We still have a long way to go, but it's much better. And that started me off on kind of a journey on a personal level, nothing to do with business, just me personally. And my only goal at that time was to survive and just get back to ground zero, which I did. But then what happened was, with what I learned about the mind, which is a big area, it's a funny area because I think it's often overcomplicated as well. What I discovered were certain principles or approaches that actually you could use to become more successful in what you were doing. And so then I actually found I was getting better than what I was before my breakdown. And at the same time, in parallel to that, I'd worked in the multinational sector for about 6 years. And then I left there, I set up my own company. And this was, my personal development was my hobby. And then at some point, without getting too long in a story about it, but there was an opportunity to cross over where a friend of mine who was running these workshops on high performance for sports people. He's a great personal trainer. He's over in LA now with a couple of businesses over there in that area. And he asked me to come in to talk about psychology. And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm nothing to do with psychology. He said, yeah, no. And I said, I want you to talk about your breakdown and what you learned. He said, because you said you're the same guy. He said, but you're better. And that really struck me as a statement. I thought, what's he talking about? And so I went back to think about, what did I learn, if anything? And I put it together into a very short workshop. I gave it to his clients and they really responded to it and got great feedback, but great results. And so from there, then what happened was, as I started to develop, at that time I was kind of working in the business consultancy. You might call it the early stages of the business coaching industry, because, at that time, business coaching wasn't accepted. And I was working with a lot of entrepreneurs and a little bit on the corporate side. But it was primarily on what I call the outer game, which is the conventional side of your outer game skills in business. And then because of what happened with my friend, I said, well, maybe I'll start introducing some of the mental side, the inner game skills. And that was very difficult because most of my clients at that time were men in Ireland. And I didn't have an open door. There was a lot of pushback. So what's happened really, with that all changed hugely when the crash happened in 0809, because everybody who was kind of pushing back, resistant, they all came back to me and said, hey, we want to talk about our mind. We want to talk about stress. And that was when then I got a real opportunity to test what I'd learned myself. So the way I look at it now, my life is the first 10 years were about applying it to my own career, using it for my life, making changes, creating a life that I really, really wanted to create, which was very useful. And then the last 10 years were about testing it with leaders, testing it with entrepreneurs. I don't know. We'll see what the next 10 years is going to hold. I'm not too sure. But I know that what's happening now with the crisis, this pandemic, is that it is pushing, as far as I can see, the mental agenda right to the center of organizations. And I think there's going to be real opportunity. And probably, what I thought was going to take maybe 3 to 5 years, I think it's going to happen in the next 12 months around this whole space of inner game conversation, inner leadership, managing. You can even see all the different webinars appearing online are to do with resilience, optimism, leading from within, leading through adversity. They're all inner game skills, and they're all kind of soft skills. Even things like emotional intelligence, adaptability, they're all mental. So that's kind of my longish answer.
Yeah, and and I mean, one of the things that struck me is that um, I've been to you've organised some fantastic speakers, really some of the top business people in Ireland and further afield, and it very often they speak very honestly about periods in business where they were under a huge degree of pressure and stress and trying to make decisions around that, and then the unraveling piece that goes with that. And it's very interesting because I know your view, just from my experience, is that it's not one size fits all. There isn't sort of one quick fix space that works with that. But what may and this I guess is relevant at the moment to sort of people undergoing a lot of challenges in COVID-19. But what sort of suggestions would you have for someone who is in a situation whereby they're making difficult decisions every day and really feeling a lot of pressure, and maybe there's no exact right decision to make, but it's maybe the piece that goes with knowing that they're doing their best. Are there any sort of steps they can take? So I know that's sort of a big question,
Mm.
but what would be when you start off working with someone who's under a high degree of pressure and what they might perceive as stress, how do you go about unraveling that?
Yeah, well, it is a big question, yeah. But you're also probably describing maybe 60, 70% of
Mm,
leaders right now, in terms of the challenges that they're facing. I think in its simplest form, the trick is to understand that your mind is always distorting everything. And, um, on a very simple level, as you know, if I'm talking about state of mind, and you know that I put a high emphasis on that because I think that's a key variable for any leader right now. And I think you're going to see a lot more coming into leadership development around this. It's already starting to come in. Um, so if you can kind of recognize that one of the key variables for you as a leader in terms of your performance is your state. And what I mean by that is your energy, which reflects in terms of your attitude, your mindset. Most people's state would be going up and down like a yo-yo over the last 2 months. Like literally could be every second day, good mood, bad mood, all over the place mood, because they're reacting perhaps without realizing it to what's going on. So your mind is always throwing up something, and whatever it throws in, unless you're really, really, really aware and alert of what's going on inside you, you just believe that it's true. Now, the best leaders will always challenge your own thinking. But if you're talking to me about the simplest thing to do, what I'd be saying is, different memories coming to mind. I remember one client who came to me, and this is back in the crash, and he was highly stressed on antidepressants, and very difficult situation personally, but the business was a really, really dicey situation. Had been referred to me by somebody that we both knew, and he said, "Look, can you help?" And I said, "I don't know. I don't know if I don't know if I'm here on time." He said, "Oh, I thought you were supposed to be Mr. Positive."
mhm,
And I said, "Well, I'm not. I can't ignore reality. Like, I'd like to think I'm
mm,
realistically optimistic." So, but my answer in terms of what I said we're going to do surprised him. I said, "Look, let's meet every week for the next 4 weeks." But I said, "I'm not going to talk to you about the business. I just want to talk to you about your mindset, about your state of mind." And I said, if anything, simple things, Paul, like with him in particular, I was saying, look, even right now, I was talking to somebody this morning. I was saying, listen, just tell me how much you're drinking at the moment. And at the moment, it's easy to kind of be like a little bit of wine every night. And if
mm,
you're a leader, I think, no, you need to be on your game right now. Simple stuff. Don't drink alcohol during the week. If you want to have a glass with beer or wine, whatever the weekend, grand, but watch it. Just watch that,
mm,
because that'll drag your state down. And when your state goes down to a certain level, your thinking gets affected. And as a leader, what you need most of all now is clarity, good state, clarity. So your exercise routine, critically important. How you start your day, critically important. Don't be looking at email. Don't be looking at the news. Don't be listening to too much negative news. Get focused on your mind, and priming your mind for how do you want your day to go. What's most important this week? Because whatever your energy as a leader is, it does ripple into your team, into every conversation like electricity. So if you're genuinely feeling upbeat, and it is possible to have an upbeat mood even in the midst of fog, what'll come across with that is it'll impact your team, even if you're not necessarily saying the right things in terms of words. Your mood will come across to the
mm,
team, and very often, what they really need is not solutions. What they want is confidence, and not a fake confidence. There, what your team really need is you're sitting there thinking, "Look, we're going to be okay.
yeah,
We're going to go over in that direction." But
yeah,
that's very hard to do if you're not doing the basics of looking after yourself. So, what I'm seeing right now, even what I'm watching with my own clients, is, as I said to you, on the physical side, exercise, minimize alcohol, get your sleep, do the basics that is easy. Get
Yeah.
off your devices an hour and a half before you go to bed,
Yeah.
get some proper sleep.
Yeah.
And then as you start your day, get your priorities in place. Simple
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
But that affects your mind.
Yeah.
Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, totally, totally. And I think we were joking about before we came on. It was I think the author of Grit. I believe Angela Duckworth, I think her name is. She was saying if you were sleeping well at the moment, then you're a sociopath, And I said, well, geez, that might be a bit scary because I'm a sort of an early riser. So generally, by the time bedtime comes around, I thankfully I sleep well, but I think also maybe in the corner of the role that you play, I think one of the first things you sort of discussed was, or we discussed, and maybe this is your sort of background as an engineer, so we discussed the mindset piece, but you also said it would be very smart to get a 3 month cash flow together. So very shortly after you and I had that discussion, that was the next piece. So I think there's definitely sort of a good balance in relation to the mindset piece, and then obviously core
Yeah.
business
Well,
principles
actually,
that go with that.
and you are right. Like, so just in case somebody might make, which would be quite common,
Yeah.
a misperception that this is all, fruity. At the
Mm.
end of the day, um, you have to be very practical. And you're probably right. Actually, it's probably my engineering approach. I did biochemical engineering in college, and as an engineering client of mine says, there's nothing better than a good spreadsheet, and definitely my mind defaults
Yeah.
to that kind
Yeah.
of structure. Um, but as you rightly said, look, if I'm talking to an entrepreneur, one of the first things I said was get your 13-week
Mm.
cash flow forecast together. It's a rolling cash flow forecast because that's just practical. Cash is king. If you're a big corporate, they have a lot of these controls in place. So to me, I often say, Paul, as you would have heard me say, there's two circles overlapping. This circle is the outer O, it's the outer
Yeah.
game. This circle is the inner game. Together they overlap, and that is the game of success. And so you need to have both.
Yeah.
So I would have started off in the outer game,
Yeah.
and then I transitioned and saw the value to the inner game. And I'm not just saying it, but on a business level, I probably would have seen it maybe a little bit before some others. But I was watching very closely what was happening on the sporting side, and actually, the sporting side has really helped open up people's minds
Yeah.
to, well, what is performance psychology? And really, at the end of the day, anyway, like if you want to break it down into very simple terms, in today's world, which is the acronym that you're going to hear more of is VUCA, VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. That phrase has been bandied about for the last maybe 4 or 5 years. It's gaining traction, but the pandemic has absolutely slapped it right in the middle
Mm.
of working life now. So VUCA is the new norm. It's not going to pass. This level of disruption is here to stay. So, one of the key skills for any leader going forward is going to be being comfortable with the uncomfortable,
Yeah. Yeah.
or with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that is a mental skill.
Mm.
So you might know a lot of different things about your industry, but that doesn't necessarily matter anymore. And certainly if you can't manage your stress levels, number one, you're not going to be able to execute at your level of talent. That's true of sport and business. And then the other thing is, you'll hear a lot more now about emotional intelligence. Now, there's different, perhaps, definitions around what that actually means, but ultimately, it's about reading your own emotions, manage your own emotions, and that of the team around you. And what we're seeing now is that skill level requirement has just jumped up as a necessity, because when we're not together, I need to be very good at that to be able to read where you're at emotionally. And so the emotional well-being of people's organizations, of their teams, has never probably been more important, because you're not in front of me personally anymore.
Yeah.
And people are struggling. So, I think that in itself is going to amplify the whole mental emotional area.
And just in relation to, we talk maybe a little bit about sort of current trends, and because you're obviously speaking to lots of different companies, large and small. So if I was to say to you about the area of remote working, if I could speak to 3 CEOs, CFOs, HR directors, and I could possibly get 3 entirely different viewpoints. So I spoke to the European general manager of one of the big life insurance companies on Friday, and he was saying that remote working, a lot of their staff are in their 20s and 30s. They're either living at home or they're working out of their bedroom, and it's not fit for purpose. Basically, they're working in a sort of a secure zone, and people can take make calls remotely, but it's not perfect. It's not the service they want to give to their customers. There's clearly then on the other side of that, then in some of the larger tech companies, and some would see it as being, it's an easy way for Twitter to promote themselves by saying we're going to do remote working, and they probably
Mm.
that would increase their number of job applications.
Mm.
Do you have any? Okay, so I guess the question would be, if you were talking to, a senior leader who's making these decisions at the moment, and they're key decisions, over the longer term, and people are probably looking for a level of commitment to say, well, does this mean I can work remotely 3 days a week, 4 days a week? Any sort of experience you have in terms of how you would go about maybe coach them to make the best decision for their business, and maybe how to go about that?
Another easy question for me, Paul. I like these
Mm.
kind of easy ones.
So I guess the thought process of what's going on
Yeah,
at the
yeah.
moment. It's
Yeah, well, I'll just give you my initial reaction to
yeah.
that. I mean, I think that the biggest obstacle to remote working has been leaders and CEOs.
Mm.
They have been the biggest block without realizing it.
Yeah.
And many of them, in my experience, have really resisted it. Um, but that has been thrown out the window now because they were forced to go into this unbelievable experiment.
Mm.
And most of the ones, but not all, most of the ones I'm speaking to are saying, "Oh, this can actually really work."
Yeah. Yeah.
And forget about my staff. I'm actually enjoying it.
Mm.
So I think it's first of all, I think from my experience, I would say the possibility of it being really effective has now been amplified because of what's happening, and that's a good thing
Yeah.
because it just means it's another possibility, which is great. It brings a little bit more creative freedom into it if we want to. But after that, though, I think it's down to the results
Yeah.
that are expected for organizations. So or the culture that we want to create, and then also maybe talent. So there might be some talent that, depending on their circumstances, which I think people are probably more sensitive now to the circumstances that are around people because they are very different. Like you're talking about one age group there, but then also there could be really great talent, but they got the homeschooling issue with kids, which is a big factor right now for a lot of
Yeah.
talent. But we don't want to lose them, so we want to give the flexibility to them. So I think that you're going to see it'll really be determined by the leaders in terms of
Mm.
what are the goals, what are the results, what's the coach you want to have, and then the talent. In terms of attracting talent, retaining talent. I think they're the variables. So you probably end up with probably a hybrid
Yeah.
model. I think in a lot of places. But I have spoken to CEOs in the last week, two in particular, who have said they don't care what's happening with the world on a remote
Mm.
level. They want everybody back in the office
Yeah.
because they want to watch everybody.
Mm.
And my argument there would be, I think that's raising another issue which we'll probably have to talk about.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
But ultimately, I think for me, my argument as somebody who has been working remotely for probably 15 years myself, in different ways, my argument has always been, I think that's a trust issue. And so, but if you can clear up as a leader, what are the results and expectations and measures of success for a person or a team?
Yeah.
Well, then, and they can deliver on that. Well, then what's the problem?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and again, I suppose my key, as I'm talking it out, my key point there would be, look, the possibility is there. I think we should definitely explore it, but it's not, again, one size fits all. It's
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
but it's definitely something that, even for me, I've been working remotely, but now I'm realizing I could do this
Yeah.
in a very different way
Mm.
and still work quite effectively,
Yeah.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess in terms of building that sort of awareness, so if you look at I guess, traditional business owner, who, they probably operated an organization that was very successful 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. And I guess, you'd mentioned about the VUCA piece about the volatility, the volatility, uncertainty, etc. We do appear to be, with each year as it goes on, it seems to be more or less predictable, more unpredictable. In terms of how you feel people can sort of adjust to that, if their natural mindset is to seek certainty and, to want to understand basically where the market's at. So I know from the work we've done together, mindfulness has been a feature for you, and it seems to be an increasing feature at the moment, and people sort of, building maybe a level of resilience that's sort of required now to be successful. Is that the initial stage, do you think, to try and build up that sort of resilience just to be able to deal with the inevitable, challenges that are going to come, or anything else that jumps to mind?
Well, look, just on that point, I think that, if you're a leader in business or any organization today, I think, you have to think about how do I get the best out of myself? And so you have to see yourself as a business athlete.
Mm.
And any athlete, they have a physical focus, the mental focus, emotional focus, and also, dare I say it, a spiritual focus, which is around purpose and meaning. And that you're going to see that coming in much more to the fore now because of what's happening here, because people are kind of saying, what's it all about?
Mm.
And so I think the foundation is looking after yourself, getting the best out of yourself. Because as well, when you're getting stuff thrown at you perhaps faster and things are changing faster, if you're not looking after yourself, yeah, it becomes more difficult.
Mm.
It becomes much more difficult. So,
Mm.
and then it's down to once you understand the base of looking after yourself, well, then it becomes easier to actually see what other people around you
Yeah.
need. If you're not a role model on looking after yourself, why would anybody bother following
Yeah.
you in
Yeah.
the same way?
Totally.
So,
Yeah.
so the role model is critically important. And so that's why I'd be challenging you or anybody else and say, well, look, are you doing your best? Are you bringing your
Mm.
best? And if the answer is no, well, then where's the
Yeah.
gap? And let's get on
Yeah.
it because that's what's needed now. And people are looking for, I think, leadership in that kind of way where they're saying, well, look, they're doing it, they're making a difference, and I feel like I'm being challenged here in a good
Yeah.
way. So let's get on. And I think that to me is the starting point. If you don't get that right, I just can't see it working as well in
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
new
Totally. Yeah.
reality.
Yeah.
Um, and what was the other part you asked me there, Paul?
Yeah, well, I guess it was just making that adjustment, into because the perception maybe of a business leader, managing director, general manager, it probably would have been that sort of authoritarian, whereby listen, whatever they say goes, and it's because there's uncertainty at the moment. I think we
Yeah,
probably all have to be a bit more human. It's now impossible to be able to say for certain exactly what direction we're going in, but I think the principles you've mentioned there about the corporate athlete piece, about really doing your best every day, and if you're in the right sort of headspace and you're mentally and physically fit to be able to deal with the challenges, then the business probably stands a much better chance, and people respect.
I think what's coming to mind is one of the analogies I think I used recently on a webinar that I was doing, which was around, if you can imagine you're the captain of a
Mm,
ship and there's people on the boat with you and they're all rowing and you're kind of going towards an island, which is what you think is your
mm,
goal or your vision. And all of a sudden this incredible fog comes in and you just cannot see anything in front of you. And everyone's kind of going, looking to you for, well, where are we going? What's going on here? So don't worry about it. The fog will go within the next 24 hours. And then it doesn't. Not only does it not go,
mm.
it actually seems to get worse. So we can't actually see where we're going. And then, maybe we enter the doldrums and it seems like we're just kind of coasting along at an inch an hour or whatever, and I think that describes in a way what's happening now is that there's this fog. Um, but I think there will be gaps in the fog. The fog will eventually lift. And I do think like once you're looking after yourself, again, I mentioned earlier on about confidence, which is a mental thing again, once it's not fake, but I do think you need to set a direction.
Mm.
And you can tell the people around, say, listen, I don't know what's going on here. Just be vulnerable. I think this is a change from the command and control general, which
Yeah.
is don't show weakness.
Yeah.
You know, I'm in charge of everything. So we're going to go that direction, guys. I need your help to figure it out. I don't have all the answers, but I know with looking at this team, we can do it. And I think the challenge then is, that you can make that you don't get worn
Mm.
out. Because what I'm seeing with a lot of leaders at the moment is my number one job watching them is on the outer game is say, right, what are the goals as you see them? Let's chunk them down and let's make sure your team are aligned. Now we can change them quickly if we need to, but keep it short term if you can, and then keep synchronizing with your team. But then along the way, just make sure you don't get
Yeah.
exhausted. So a lot of people are working really long hours at the
Mm.
moment, and maybe some employers want that. And I don't think it's the worst thing all the time because I work long hours too. But what I am conscious of is just balancing up my day
Yeah.
so that I'm taking regular breaks. Even today at lunchtime, I just went for a cycle for half an hour, not because I particularly wanted to, but I just know that it just resets my
Yeah. Very
energy.
good.
I wouldn't be doing your level of cycles, Paul. And you're like you'd be more elite than me, but it's even half an hour of a cycle
Yeah.
in an intense way for me. It gives me a lot of
Yeah. Yeah.
energy.
Yeah. Well, certainly, but my cycles are within the 5 kilometer radius, of course. So, I,
So are mine. Two kilometer
yeah.
loop.
And just before just I guess to sort of move towards the end, just from a productivity perspective. So, just while we're chatting, in terms of what because we're all focused on what's in our control at the moment. I think, I mean, if I look back, some of the things you've managed to achieve. So obviously you've written, am I right in saying 2 books? Is that correct? Or I certainly have
Yeah,
one.
yeah,
You've been a
yeah,
playwright in the past, and that's obviously on top of keeping your business running and working with lots of different people, and we'll talk about maybe some of the events side of things. So when you were looking at some of those goals, because they're to me they're sort of extraordinary, in terms of going out and writing a book. So maybe just at a high level, and this isn't necessarily directed specifically about people looking to write a book, but for someone looking at biting off a project and saying, right, I want to get sort of stuck into that. What sort of, I don't want to say what possessed you to write a book, but what motivated you and how did you put together that sort of project? If it's okay to ask you as to how you followed through on that, Shane, in addition to everything else.
Yeah, yeah. Well, actually, it's relevant as well at the moment because I'm writing another book at the
Right.
moment. So I'm having to take my own medicine
Mm-hmm.
again, which is interesting because it is challenging. So the book at the moment is called The Inner CEO, which is around my own experience of working with leaders around the inner game. I'm trying to kind of make it
Yeah.
practical as the engineer, you know. So, well, for what it's worth, I think if you've got like most people I know will procrastinate on a key project, and say, for example, one of the books they inspire me, and then also say one of the plays, The Waiting Room. Both of those were things that actually were things that I really, really wanted to do. They were just kind of felt like I just have to do them. And I did procrastinate on them, being honest. You know, I did procrastinate longer than I would have liked. And then for both of them, I think if I'm looking at what made them happen was I kind of got fed up with myself because I thought, you're the guy getting everybody else to do this, that, and the other. Come on, like, you know, so what's it going to take? And then I just went, right, grand. I just took it and I made a decision.
Mm.
And sometimes just making a decision is part of the quest. That's the first bit. Say, okay, I'm just going to get it done. But it's probably followed very quickly by a second one, which is accountability. And so, if I have a very important project, like say, for example, my this book at the moment, and in particular, I remember The Waiting Room, the play. You know, I was dilly dallying on it, and I was talking to one of my friends, and she said to me, "What would you say to a client?" Which is a question my friends will throw back at
Mm.
me, Paul, whenever they want to annoy me.
Yeah.
You know, it just shows I'm just being honest. And I said, "Oh, I'd probably say, listen, get somebody to hold you accountable and just get
Yeah.
it done."
Yeah.
And she said, okay. She said, I'll hold you accountable. And I said, no, 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 I can't do it now because I'm really
Yeah.
busy. And actually, at the time, I was probably in the busiest year. I'd say I don't think I ever had a busier than that
Mm.
year before I wrote that play, for example. And she said, well, if it's that important, you should just get it done. And I remember looking at her, kind of going, now she was somebody now that I really respected as well because she was a mentor to me, and I didn't want to lose face. So I went, okay, Grant. And over the next 6 months, I kind of found time. So what I discovered was if you make a decision and say, okay, I'm just going to make this happen, just going to
Yeah.
make it happen. And then you get somebody that you respect and they can check in on you every now and again, and you report back to them maybe weekly or monthly. And the person you don't want to lose
Yeah.
face to,
Yeah.
you will find the
Mm.
time. I found it on trips. I found it on planes, on trains. I'd be dictating, you know, when I was walking. And I came up with different innovative ways to get it done. And I got the play done in 9 months. The book was done in a year, but as anybody who's written or published a book will tell you, you know, you think writing the book is hard, publishing it can be
Mm.
harder. Um, but I think, you know, I could overcomplicate it for you. There is skill attached in terms of structure and learning, all that kind of stuff. But actually, if you want to simplify the whole thing down, make a
Yeah.
decision, look yourself in the mirror, make a decision, and then find somebody else and say, right, will you hold me accountable? And if you're serious and you're somebody who's kind of who likes getting stuff done, those two things will make a big difference. So maybe that's not the answer you're looking for, but
No,
that to me
totally.
is
Yeah,
what I
yeah, and
felt.
I think the accountability thing. I mean, the what's worked well for me certainly is just the work we've done together. And I know we joke about the accountability budgie, but but it's being able to say sort of commitments that have sort of yes or no at the end of the week, or certainly green, which is done, orange is more than sort of 50 or 60%, and then it's just sort of sticking to it. And each week, then you get, I guess, more. You're clearer about decisions you make, and you can kid yourself by maybe not pushing yourself, but then you can be unrealistic. And to me, certainly, the stuff that doesn't get done is the stuff that's unrealistic that I almost know that I'm not going to do. But it's the stuff, as you say, that maybe pushes you a little bit, just saying, right, well, I need to find extra time, or I need to say yes to, you know, one thing maybe over another, and that seems to make all the difference.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think you know anyway, I'm a fan of focus. So, you know, that's part of, I suppose, maybe my job as well is that, you know, to trying to help clients to say, well, what do you want, but why do you
Mm,
want it? And then most people have too many things
yeah,
on, and they'll use that as an excuse not to nail the couple of things that
yeah,
really would really make the biggest difference. And so the 80-20 rule, you know, is well known in business, but a lot of people don't always consider that applies to your personal
yeah,
life as well, you
yeah.
know. So and plus, look, for me as well, I love writing. So it's a passion
Mm,
for me. I like getting into it. I'm probably not as big a fan of maybe the editing side of it, but I love writing. Um, but yet editing is very important too. So, I'm doing something that I enjoy. Um, but as you say, there's nothing like having the accountability buddy. We'll give the credit though where it's due. That's
Right.
South Park.
Okay.
So, Paul, that's not
Okay.
that's
Okay.
not me.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I obviously you and I catch up regularly. For people maybe who are keen to get in touch, I know I think your Monday email. I think you have about 5,000 people you send it to every week. Is it what do you want to maybe shout out your email address to?
Sure, sure. Well, I mean, the general email is support at
Yeah.
shanecradock.com. That's one D. The website is shanecradock.com, one D. The book so the email is a weekly email that's based actually on the book that we're talking about called
Yeah.
Inspire Me. And it's a kind of a general enough email, but it's geared towards doing better in life and leadership. And it goes out every Monday. It's designed to be read in less than 60 seconds. So yeah, I'm doing it since 2008, actually, believe it or not. Every Monday I write a short email. So, and then that became the genesis for the book, the Inspire Me book. So
Brilliant,
that's it. Yeah.
brilliant. Okay, well, I'd like to take this opportunity to say thanks very much you've been a fantastic support over recent years, and thanks very much for your time this afternoon, Shane.
Oh, you're
Thanks a lot.
welcome. Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. Yeah. Thank you.